go, and we're in business. Lovely. So I've got some images and stuff lined up for you. Listen, as Caoimhe said, I'll just give you quickly 2 seconds. What I do is I'm an artist folklorist. I record folklore, and we've been doing it for years, recording stories from people and recording their voices, recording how they sound, how they mess, how they act, the entertainment value of it, not just for academics and just off for conferences and things like that. It's for ordinary people. I suppose I grew up in the coast of Wexford here, maybe about 40 minutes from where I'm sitting now. And I suppose we grew up where there was always beliefs and customs and traditions, and people didn't really take them for, didn't really value them, I suppose, themselves, you know. And I I took an idea that if we don't write our own history, someone else is going to do it for us. So I'd record, but one of the most important things with recording, it's not about recording and collecting and putting it away somewhere on a shelf somewhere. It's the word share. I suppose technically our practice has been sharing. Before there was ever a Facebook button or a YouTube button called share, that has been a really strong part of our practice. The idea of sharing and generating conversations and getting people back involved in those conversations again. And we should never lose sight of people and all these things and what ordinary people do and all the different similarities and differences. There's no one right, there's no one wrong, right? That's the bottom line as well. So if you some of you would know me from Folklore.ie. So if you don't, the web page that I run and the Facebook page that I run is Folklore.ie, and that's where I use it as a gauge, as an open studio to my practice and sharing beliefs and customs and traditions and getting feedback from people. So it's a two-way street. But that's enough about that. That's the process, right? And that could become apparent. Listen, I can't start today without thinking that photograph was taken probably, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years ago outside my grandmother's house in North County Wexford. Every year as a child, I used to make British crossing there. And here she was. What I might do is we might mute all, if that's okay. I'm going to go mute all. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to do some technical stuff, folks. I'm going to press mute all, right? So you're all muted, but unmute yourselves if you need to jump in. Is that okay? We'll let you in. Okay, so I'm going back to share my screen again, just to stop any interference coming in the background. So here's my grandmother. She was 101 years of age and just making St. Bridget's crosses with me. And she loved getting St. Bridget's crosses because I suppose it was heralded to come in the spring, but also I think she was using them in a bit of a black market thing. She was bringing them into the daycare centre in Gorey and giving them to people, older people. It's always been an important day for a lot of older people, where people would make St. Bridget's crosses and give them to people who couldn't make them themselves. People would hang them in their homes. People would put them in cow houses. So for me, I suppose it's always been an important day. One thing which I want to point out, and a lot of people will say, not everyone made St. Bridget's crosses in Ireland. Most people, I'd say, of my age now, 40 some years of age, even the ones in 30s, 20s, would have learned through the primary school. A lot of, there would have been certain families who would have made them, but on a larger scale, a lot of it came through primary school teachers. Mine was a woman called Mrs. Lee, or we had in second class. But for those of you who don't know, St. Bridget's crosses were put up around people's homes. For protection, usually over a threshold. And some people will burn them, but in my grandmother's case, they were never burnt. They were always left up over the doors. And most people I've met, they would keep them, or if they were falling apart, to be left outside in the houses, whatever. Here's one thing, an image I want to show you as well. This is before plastic became a no-no, a global no-no. These were made probably in the late 80s, early 90s. And my grandmother thought were the best St. Bridget's crosses ever because they didn't fall apart and they held their own. So there's loads of, so I know plastic straws now you'd be shot if you had them, but I took these photographs maybe in 2002 or 3. But even before I even go on, just as I said to you, Brigid herself, we're talking, the figure Brigid is, I suppose, in some ways she would be more well known than Patrick in Ireland. She'd be more regarded as Patrick. There's more folklore, there's more customs around Brigid the woman. I suppose what I'm going to talk to you now is the kind of legacy that she's left behind, the contemporary legacy that she's left behind, the ancient and contemporary legacy. You're going back to the 4th, 5th, 6th century in County Louth. The Kildare people claim her, but the Louth people claim her as well, up in the northeast of Ireland. But the ones in Kildare kind of claim her. She's known as Brigid of Kildare. But the cross-making tradition is probably one of the most common things that we would know. So. And anyone that would go into older houses here in Ireland, you will always notice a St. Bridget's cross over a threshold, over the door. Here's one here, Stella Byrne's dresser here in County Wexford down the road from me, and you'll always have a St. Bridget's cross over the door, or over a window, or over the door in a cowhouse. Likewise, you'd always find pieces of blessed palm. This is very particular Catholic around Easter, but you'll always find Brigid there as well in the same way. It's interesting when you put in St. Brigid's Cross. One of the great things about the school's folklore scheme and Ducas.ie is the word searchability of it, right? So you can dismiss or back up loads of different customs and traditions which we think exist in certain parts of the country, but when you type them into this collection that was done in 37, 38 through word search, some things are, a clearer picture is formed. No, it's not completely 100% accurate, but it's interesting to see the counties like Donegal, Cavan, where Brigid comes up. I've noticed in Donegal an awful lot, so much material that I've collected. I would get it in Donegal around Brigid, probably more than Kildare in some ways, right? Which is really interesting one to watch out. And with that, I want to show you a little video that I recorded in Donegal about 10 years ago with these women. Just to stick it on for you here. Yeah. I'll stop share. And don't be afraid, as I said to you, don't be afraid to unmute yourselves and jump in if you need be, Caoimhe. Can you look after that if people want to ask questions in between? Because I don't like talking in the vacuum as much. So hang on, we'll get some of these on. This little collection, a little excerpt from a collection called The Borrowing Days.
Well, in our area, the St. Brigid's crosses are made on the feast of the eve of St. Brigid's, and you would gather now. I know some neighbours would gather together in one house, and somebody would go out and say a prayer, before you come into the house, carrying the rushes with them. And during the cross making, they would have poundies, which is mashed potatoes and onions and butter, lovely butter.
Mm-hmm. And then there'll be a cross made for sort of the house and also for all the outhouses outside, the byres or the stable for the horse or, places like that there to protect the animals throughout the year as well. That's the general idea, to be kind of a thing, And if there's any old person in the area that wouldn't be able to make one, you do extra ones for them or whatever,
Yes, well, I still make them. And I would cut the rushes if there was any around the garden, which is planted, and on the night before the 31st. And I would make my crosses that evening, and I would put them out before bedtime, before 12. And I would have a little bit of cloth, or some sort of white scarf, and I would put them all into a bowl and put a big stone on top of them, so it was a stormy night, they wouldn't blow away, and leave them out on the windowsill all night, and St. Brigid come during the night and bless them. And then the cloth would have, if you had any sores or that during the year, sore throats or any sores, especially with children, that you'd rub this little bit of cloth on them.
You used to have to cut the rushes, the head of the house, normally did that, before the sun went down on the 31st of January. Mm-hmm. And then he came to the back door and he called out for the people in the house to go on their knees and to welcome St. Brigid in. And he called out 3 times and the household answered. And then he opened the door, came in, and then we waited until the sun was well set. We had poundies first. You had the shave of rushes onto the table. And then after that, when you had the meal, everybody tied a few rushes around their head, band, something to do with headaches. And then you made so many crosses, depending on how many byres you had. If you had an old neighbour that didn't make ones, you would make ones for them as well. And we'd normally bless them. Somebody in the house would bless them themselves, but now it's a custom taken at the church. Not at that time, when I was growing up a few years ago.
Isn't that just lovely? Absolutely gorgeous. That was recorded in about 2010 in Donegal. Few lovely things that cropped up there, folks. Can you also hear me? You can, of course you can, right? I'm going to flick through images here. One of the things which cropped up there, I'm going to look at your faces for a second. One of the things which cropped up in that for me was the very private ritual of the whole thing, making the crosses, gathering the youngest child in some cases, bringing them in. That was really, really interesting. That you find that a lot with our May bush traditions here in Ireland as well, even our Halloween traditions, the private aspect of so many of these things. That was lovely. I loved around the protection for sore throats and headaches. That crops up a lot with St. Blaise's Day, Candlemas Day, a couple of days afterwards. This kind of day, give or take, I was talking to a friend of mine just there a while ago before I came on here, and we're saying technically probably would have been the 5th of February would have been St. Brigid's Day, give or take a couple of days, you know, with shifts in calendars, the date has changed, but I suppose maybe it makes more sense at the start of the month now, or the end of one month, to start of one month for this feast day to be marked this way, right? But there's a lot around protection, and we're right in the middle of our winter. We're actually, as I said to you at the start, we're coming from, and by God, we all need it, we're coming from the dark winter, and the evenings are getting brighter. There's light, the primroses, there's spring is coming in the air. So it's no coincidence this date and this celebration bringing green into the home, you know, these kind of things. There's a load going on there, which is probably can be hard to explain, but I think anyone you can understand really what's happening if you get a sense of nature at all in you at all. I'm going to share my screen with you and walk you through some of the things. Here's my little ones today. Every year, this day of the year, every day a year I collect rushes on this day. You collect them, as the Donegal woman had said, before sunset. You bring them in, and here's a little one, my little one last year bringing them in. Here she is this evening bringing them in about an hour ago. She brings them in, and then we make rushes on the table. So here's my little ones making them about 3 or 4 years ago, and here they are making them this evening. So it's even lovely for a private family ritual, and that's what's lovely I find about the kind of work that I'm sharing on Folklore.ie and the working with meeting people, is there's a lovely personal aspect to this kind of this process. Obviously the church element, the religious element of it, but there's a very personal element to it, which I really, really like, right? So here we are a couple of years ago making crosses at 7:30 one evening, and here we are this evening back to the same thing again. So there's kind of nice, those dates always make sense to kind of, I kind of chart my own year around these dates, to be honest with you. It gets me through the year. I know when Maybush is coming up, those kind of things get me through the year, and I suppose it's no surprise we put up Christmas trees or put up lights, celebrate things in the depths of the winter solstice either. So there's what people would do. You'd make your St. Brigid's crosses in rushes in this case, different designs. I'll talk about that later on. The woman up in Donegal mentioned a white cloth. Other people used a red flannel. More people use blue for a bratach breed, or brat breed as people call it now. And you leave them outside with the idea that Brigid would bless them that night. That was the idea that Brigid would bless them. And what would happen is you would, these would be, you'd hang them up in your own house. You'd hang them up if you had cattle. People are still using these in sheds, or you would give them to neighbours. And that's one of the lovely things about this, is people give them to neighbours. As I said to you, look, here is a blue one that we put out. Now, even though my mother didn't do it, Granny and them did do it. Loads of people did stuff I found over the years where people did loads of traditions, and they dipped right in the middle of the folk revival, as we called it, back in the 60s and early 70s. We dropped like a stone into water. So many traditions in Ireland, or Maybush, or so many things just dropped, and now they're only becoming around. So it's funny, on a global sense, when we had a folk revival or a folk awareness, things just dropped in other cases. So there's a thing called a red flannel. Some of you may be aware of that as well, by the way. So just to show you, I'll play another woman from Donegal that I recorded actually this time last year down here in my house. Brigid Tunney. Brigid's she's a nun, a mercy nun, as far as I think, if I get the order right. But this is my grandmother's red flannel. I found in a box there only recently, maybe last year. She would have had it, and that red flannel, like the brat breed, was kept up then to rub on people's hands, if our fingers, if our heads have had headaches or sore throats. Or one woman I recorded in Clonmel once remembers wrapping it around her finger when she got a needle in it, and she said it drew the needle out. Right, but that's all belief. That's all very personal belief, right? So. Right, but here's a lovely story I recorded. I couldn't help but record this, from Brigid Tunney from Donegal. I recorded it last year, and she talks about the bratach breed, but then she talks about another lovely aspect to it, where the children's clothes were left out in this night, and that was done here. I only found out recently from Robbie Sinnott here in Wexford. That was done.
Yeah, why can't I see myself?
Well, you're unmuted now, and so let's go do new share. So hang on. I hope you're all okay, folks. You're all taking all this in. Sometimes it's hard for me when I'm in the dark here talking to you, but listen, that's all okay. I'm used to talking to myself. As long as you don't email yourself that's late at night, then you're okay. You're in business. Here we go. Where is Brigid? Here we go. Here's that recording from last year. There's no end to this material, folks, right? Okay, we go. Press play.
I noticed you have a blue one, Mick. Well, the one that we would have at home, it would have been red flannel that we would have used. And it was put out on the eve of St. Brigid. And the idea was that Brigid, as she passed around the house during Brigid's Eve, she would have blessed the bratach, the sheet. And then it was brought in and it was kept if anybody had sore throats in particular and headaches and that sort of thing. But in my mother's time, and I was thinking it was about 1930 or 31, she was about 10 or 11 at the time, there was an incident that happened. And in those days, in her home, my grandmother put out an item of clothing belonging to every member of the family. And it was put out as well as the Brat of Brigid. And they lived by the shores of Lough Swilly in Donegal. And there had been a drowning there and they couldn't find the body. So one of the men of the search party had heard that Granny had done this, that she had items of clothing in the house, blessed by Brigid. So he came to the house and he asked, would she give them something? And she gave my uncle's jacket. And they took the jacket with them and they went out in the boat. And the jacket kind of went with the current initially, and then eventually began to swirl around. And as it swirled, they dived to seek it and they found the body. So, that's just as a story associated with, with a blessed coat by Brigid on St. Brigid's Eve, and the men brought back the jacket back to my grandmother again. But that is a story my mother remembered from her childhood, and she would have been about 10 or 11 at the time. So that was the early 30s. Yeah.
On Lough Swilly.
On Lough Swilly, yeah.
It's fairly impressive story. Got me when Brigid told me. I couldn't believe it. Powerful story, and that aspect of hanging up, putting out clothes, I found here in North Wexford. I'd be surprised if it's found in North Wexford and found in Donegal. I'm sure it's found in other counties as well. So that's another aspect of it, leaving out just the bratach. I'm going to go through some more images with you now and just talk through some stuff with you. Now, here we go at all. Here we go at all. Now, bum, bum, bum. Here, one thing. I took this up in Kildare about 2 years ago, and just to show you, can you all see? Yep. It shows you all different styles of St. Brigid's crosses, because we're so used to the standard St. Brigid's cross. And the standard St. Brigid's cross, from my own kind of hunch, was popularized by the advent of RTE, or national broadcaster, and the icon of RTE. Because people now would say to me, oh, there's only one style of St. Brigid's cross. But when you look back, people go, there were numerous styles and different styles of St. Brigid's crosses. And another thing which is really interesting, this is a photograph from William Green. This is from the National Museum of North. And William Green was an amazing photographer, amazing guide, collector, great eye. And this is a straw cross. That's the other thing as well. We have the rushes with the rush story, the story of Brigid making the rushes on her father's deathbed, picking the rushes off the floor. But straw was also popular. And as I'm going around with more and more work, I'm seeing more and more elements of straw being used. And one thing that kind of puzzled me to start when I saw straw being used, now I've made a few straw crosses since, and I've made a Waterford cross here with straw, and I'll show you examples in a while. Straw actually is very, very strong, much stronger than the rush cross. It will actually hold its own much stronger during the year. But the question is, why? Where would you get a straw cross in the middle of the start of spring? And actually, sorry, just before I even show you, here's a straw cross, a Waterford cross. This is I only came across this cross yesterday, right? This was made by a woman called Peg O'Regan. I know I found this out last night by Peg's son contacted me. Peg died at the age of 99, and in 1990, I think it was 1999 or 2009, she died on the 1st of February. And she was known, she made these particular St. Brigid's crosses, these Waterford crosses, we call them now, right? I had a 4-diamond one here, a 5-diamond one here. Peg had a kind of a 6-diamond. Can you all see the difference there? A 6-diamond is a wrapping thing. And when you get talking to people go, oh, God, I remember a wrapping cross. And sometimes until you see it, they go, oh, that's the one where I remember. So that was yesterday. I took these photographs yesterday. I absolutely love this photograph of the straw and this man, Denny Hanlon in Kilmichael, literally only a couple of miles from me, maybe three or 4 miles away from me here. And last night I got sent this photograph of the woman who made it. Isn't it incredible, isn't it? And here she is showing students down in Ring how to make these crosses. So just that, to me, this was maybe this talk has helped it, but just the whole thing unraveled for me last night. But the reason why I'm looking at straw crosses now, I don't know when Peg made her crosses, right? But I know some of the other crosses were made around this time of the year. And what you can see, Aileen and a man here called Tommy Ryan and our two girls standing on, they're standing on a corn stand or a haggard stand. And these are where the corn was kept. This is another photograph. This is from 1936 in Wexford. These are a different version of it. These are solid. These are different. These are what did the English call them? A different system. We just call them mushrooms here, right? They're just stones with uprights for it to stop the rats going up. But there were always spring trashings this time of year, and a spring trashing probably for sometimes for seed as well. Here's remains of some of these in Galway. I'm not sure if anybody's ever seen these before. Michael Conway is a great book on these, by the way. Manning, South Carlow, originally Roscommon, is a great book on these corn stands. But these corn stands, that would explain where people, if they were making it in February, where they would get straw. This explains where they would get it. There's a lovely account, again from Kilmichael, literally 3 miles away from me here, by Patrick Kennedy. Patrick Kennedy recorded this in his book. He said, when one of these stacks is taken down to be trashed, the labourer hesitates in order to excite interest among the bystanders. Before he darts his suspended fork into a sheaf while the cats and dogs with burning eyes and cocked ears are watching the plunge. Down goes the prong, up goes the sheaf, off lip the mice and rats and helter-skelter after them, the cats, dogs and children. What stag or fox hunt can equal in interest to chase for the next 2 minutes, with his accompaniment of barks, shouts and laughter, and which is to be repeated every 5 minutes till the bottom layer is removed. And there's where you would get straw in February to make straw crosses, right? Just to show you as well, even just out and about, I love this photograph. This man called Jim Gavin up in East Galway, up in Skahana. I took it about last year. Jim has got his standard cross here. He's got a blessed palm cross here. Over his shoulder, he's got a bit of blessed palm. But he's also, did you have it here? And maybe I'm holding it. He's got it over his head. You see a little cross there over his head? That's a little wooden St. Bridget's cross that are found around the country as well, right? But what Jim also has showed me was he has this, again, he learned it from his father. Standard two little pieces of Sally and bits of, these were rushes now, mind you, wrapped around it. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, this is not in a museum. This is on Jim's dresser, and he probably made it maybe a couple of years ago and leaves it up. And he calls that a St. Bridget's cross as well. So here's just a basic skeleton of how you make one. They're very, very simple. Like bits of Sally's cut, wedged together and wrapped around it, just tied. It's very simple. I've got demonstration videos to show you how to do them. They're very simple. I find the straw holes better, right? In the photograph of Jim, you can also see as well, folks, you can see different types of crosses that were replaced. And again, if you go through the school's folklore scheme, again, I was looking here in my own native Wexford, there's a reference to these crosses as well. Little St. Bridget's crosses. I came across men in Mayo, and these photographs were sent to me by Louise Rosengrave in Clare. It was a house that she'd bought, and the crosses were nailed. Every year, one of these crosses would be made and nailed up around the house, up over the rafters and over the doors, right? So you see them here. Again, people will call these St. Bridget's crosses. It's all about belief, folks. And whatever you believe in, whatever works for you, all rough and ready, which is nice, and nailed. That's the account in Wexford as well. They were nailed up high. I'm going to go through some more images with you. I hope you're still okay. Are you? You're all okay, Grant? I'm a devil to talk, so but I'm leading myself through images. So here's Jim Lally's one for you. Again, sorry, Jim Gavin's one for you up in Skahana in Galway. Again, he put a new ceiling up, but he kept the old little cross that was made. That's what he called his St. Bridget's cross. Actually, one thing I want to point out to you as well, on All Souls Night, I've come across people who would leave out their crosses, their St. Bridget's crosses, to be blessed on All Souls Night. Not terribly common, but they would leave them out that night as well to be blessed, as well as St. Bridget's Night. All Souls Night is the 2nd of November. Right, it's tied in. Like probably tied. I don't know why it's done, but that's why it was done. And here's actually a lovely account from the school's folklore scheme from Wexford. The St. Bridget's crosses were made of small flat pieces of wood held in the centre by a nail. These were also placed over the entrance of the door of the house. Right, so different types of crosses were made. I've got a lovely story to show you. A woman from North Wexford. And again, I'm showing you my home place because I know it well, you know, that kind of way, but I kind of find when I show stuff on Folklore.ie, I get the other versions back from Mayo and Loud and all over the country. Here's a woman called Alice Sheen. I'm looking for it now. Here it is. This is a powerful story, lads, right? It's just a little tiny clip from a collection like this. It would have been on DVDs or now on YouTube, right? I'm going to let you listen to this. It's about a man who didn't have a St. Brigid's cross in his cowhouse, and then when he got one, what happened? So this shows you the belief.
And I'll tell you a very good one. A neighbour, it'd be a cousin of my sister's husband's, Joe Ireland, came out to visit one night. And he was a connection, close connection, came out, and he would come regularly for a little visit. But he came this night anyhow. How are things, Joe? How are things going with Joe, and how are you getting on? God, not good at all. He says, I'm losing a lot of the cattle. They're dying with me. And I listened and all, and the poor granny was alive then. Well, do you know what you'll do, Joe? Take home a St. Brigid's cross with you. And what's that about, said Joe. So the granny explained to him, you know, you take this out with you and you put it up in the cow house or wherever, in the cattle house or whatever, and keep it there. So Joe said, yes, fair enough. He says, I'll do that. So they chatted away and had his cup of tea, and it was time for Joe to head for home. And Granny says, have you got your cross now? Oh, yes, he says, I have it down here in my pocket. So poor old Joe come on, and he hopped up on his little tractor and headed for home. And it was just the two of them in the house, Joe and Robbie. And there were two brothers, never got married. And Joe would knock around a little bit, but Robbie was a quieter type of man. He would nearly always be at home. But Joe says, I'll go ahead now and I'll get home to poor Rob. So he came in along anyway, and he says, I wonder what will I do? I think I'll hang up the cross first, he says, before I go in. So he went on over to the house, anyhow, to the cow house, and he put up the St. Brigid's cross. And he says, I'll go in along now and I'll see how Robbie is. So he come in along anyhow, and we're talking and chatting. And by and by, there was this awful commotion. An extraordinary commotion went on in the yard, which they never witnessed or experienced before. And hadn't all the cattle broke out of their bales and out onto the yard and around, and they were roaring and going wild. So poor Joe rushed out and tried his best to settle him down and get him back in. And to the day he died, he would tell you that story. And what he put it down to, he said it was the devil was in the house, and he must have been not wanting to go, but they got him out. They got him out of it. He'd say that. He'd tell that story to anyone who come along.
Crossing.
The cross, yeah. Yeah, got rid of him. Yeah.
Do you ever... There's Tony Hayes' aunt singing in the background. Is that lovely, isn't it? Just a lovely account. That's from Alice Sheen up in Gorey. It's an interesting one as well when people talk about rushes. Where we lived, where I grew up, there was no winter rushes, boggy, wet land. So we had no problem with rushes. But the amount of texts and emails I got during the week, and telling you, if I was a farmer now and COVID wasn't around and I had a rushy field, I'd tell you I'd be a millionaire, because you could be selling rushes to half the country, half the world you could be selling rushes. But because we're in lockdown, loads of people are being creative, and Caoimhe Dunn is one of them. I'll just show you first, like people are making, like back to me, making my grandmother's straw plastic crosses back in the late 80s. I saw this on the Loud Museum up in there today. Gorgeous, lovely little demonstrations how to make some Brigid's cross out of card and stuff like that. So it doesn't really, things change. This is a great image from Caoimhe. Caoimhe sent this to me during the week, and she's going to post in a link to her video, a YouTube video she has of making one, later on as well for you. So it's lovely, made out of newspapers, and the amount of traction that got online, because people are going, God, I can make it now. I can make one now, right? Now, and half the time, folks, as well, it's not about whether you're mad religious or got a mad belief in Brigid. Sometimes as well, it's the making is lovely. And again, the making, and again, whether the making at this time of year is really important. Actually, I think that is really important. That there's a craft element which is really interesting. It's seen a national craft, you know, in some ways when you consider a national vernacular craft. Just to even point out as well, because obviously Wexford, Waterford, South Kenny, South Tip and all have huge connections to Newfoundland, and I've spent time over there. They had Bridget's crosses, right? They didn't. Well, they had rushes, but they called them rishes, but they made them out of these things. They made them out of flaggers. They made them out of the flaggers were used here as well. Flaggers were the leaf of the bog iris, right? Let's hope I got my bog iris images right. I have a recording of this man talking about it, but I won't show you now. But he just tells me that's what they used, but they don't do it anymore, he said, right? So it went over there. It's no surprise it went to Newfoundland, and no surprise it survived. Here's another little thing actually as well, another little small thing that's interesting. We used to make these with Granny at the end of rush making, cross making sessions years ago. Little bits of leftover rushes, you call them Brigid, and you literally just make them. You use your finger then to make the head, and literally a couple of ties. There's I used to find my grandmother used to. She used to cut out heads out of people from the newspaper. This was Catherine Thomas, and stick them onto it. And you wouldn't know what you'd find around the house. You'd find a neighbour's head stuck into one of these things. But that's all part of it as well, right? But these are called little. And again, different. No matter if I give a bunch of rushes to someone, what's kind of lovely as well about these kind of ones, if I give a bunch to every child in the school or workshop you're working in, they'll always come back with something different, which is great to see too. There's Alice and Seamus talking. Now, come here to me. Are we still all okay? We're doing okay for time. I'm surprised myself, lads. Jenny Mac.
We're doing quite well. We have a message there from Abby just saying the local village where near her had cut rushes and left them all out for people to collect safely and socially distanced. And she's busy making a cross as we speak, which is lovely. And Ash there has said his gran kept her Bridget's cross in the kitchen above the cooker to ensure no kitchen fires would happen. And sure, she didn't have any fires.
That's lovely you say that, Ash, because I was the man that I met yesterday, Denny Hannon, literally he's 3 miles away from me. And I'd go to Bunclody to do my shopping. So before you say I was outside my 5K limit here in Ireland, right? I stopped off at his yard and got a photograph. But he says to me, he said, "Do you want to take it with you?" You know, he told me first. He says it was when he had hung it in his house. It was always told there'd never be fires, never a fire in the house. And then he asked me, he said, "Would you like to take it just to show for this demonstration tonight?" And I said, "If I take this tonight, there's a fear of your house going on fire, so leave it. Don't give it to anyone. Keep it in your house." And that's where he has it for the last 40-some years. But yeah, that fire element is really interesting. And that fire element is really interesting when it comes to St. Blaise's and Candlemas Day. I think there's a couple of that make more sense to you towards the end. You'll see some of the dates that kind of they mix over each other. Here's one thing when you talk about mixes, you see these young fellas down in Kerry carrying a Brigid and a little St. Bridget's cross on her. It's from I think this is Homer Skyte's photographs from '72. Brilliant documentation of Biddy boys down in Kerry. Now, to be fair, that tradition, I'll show you again, was found up and down the country of recordings. I'll show you some people in Mayo talking about it in a while. But even to see the lads wearing young lads here wearing the straw masks, again, people would argue saying, "Oh, straw masks running for weddings." So there's always things mixed, and new layers come over new layers and form, and new things are formed. Simple things as well, like a visitor here. You can see some of the chaps didn't have any masks on them. More had a visitor on them or a mask on them. So again, things change. We will talk about this a bit later with you. But here's one thing. I was looking back at a recording I'd made in Mayo there this morning, and a woman in Mayo said this is what she remembers when the mummers would call to their houses and it carried the little Brigid. And again, it was this. I know there's the parade aspect of it, but there was the. For those of you who don't know, there was the house calling element to it. And again, for those of you from outside of Ireland here, we're obviously going to tell you that we brought in the tradition of Halloween to the States, or the current state that you have, the idea of dressing up, calling to your neighbours' houses, looking for alms. I know the English did it as well to some degree, but it was very, very strong here and still very strong. And at certain times of the year, people would get dressed up and called, whether it be a harvest dance, whether it be Halloween, whether it be gugging for eggs at Easter, whether it be out hunting around on St. Stephen's Day, or whether it be the other days. So well, you'd be doing it for sometimes for weddings, to welcome the wedding to bride and groom home. So here they are of people calling. But here's the little verse she had. "Here is St. Bridget dressed in white. Give us some money to honour the night." That's simple. So it was a kind of a house calling aspect where people would call and get some money as well. Get some money for, could be a party afterwards or a drink or a bit of a session. Again, these are amazing photographs, by the way. These are just incredible photographs, right? Look at this, just gorgeous. Again, young lads wearing little straw hats to maybe have for St. Stephen's Day or hunting Iran, or with a plastic mask they may have had for Halloween, right? So loads of lovely layers. Caoimhe will point out, you see these boys' hats here, the Kerry boys going mad for this stuff, this type of grass, but a gorgeous capture. Again, the man playing the box here. I won't play the Mayo women, will I, for you? Because I mightn't have time to play it. But believe me, the Mayo women are talking about that tradition and they remembered it. One thing as well, here are some photographs. These are photographs from Kildare, South Kildare. John Coffey sent them to me. Again, the mummers would go out, or the breejogs would go out, and they would go out and they would be, sometimes it'd be a parade, and more times literally be calling from pub to pub, dressed up, collecting money for breed, right? So these are photographs from 1979, absolute class photographs, right? Look at this, like, Jesus, look at this for an amazing image like that where I'm hovering over there now, right? And I got these from John Heaton up in South Laois, and his boys, his breed dogs in South Laois, forget about St. Bridget's Eve or St. Bridget's Day, they would go out for the whole month of February, right? And we need to look at this in the bigger picture, because Lent, and when Lent happened, there were no dances. So you couldn't go to a dance, right? So these guys would have a gathering in the pub. This is in Mark Ramsbottom's pub, and they would literally cut loose. Just amazing images, aren't they? Just nuts, right? And
we were talking about this recently, Michael, just talking about how all over Europe there's carnival traditions around Shrove Tuesday. And Ireland, while we have Pancake Tuesday, we don't have a big guising tradition associated with it. But you were saying that probably the fact that we had the breedogs and the biddies going out all through February, that kind of gave us the carnival for a whole month.
Absolutely. One thing which really striking, which I loved about the South Leinster stuff, John told me this clearly. He said they always, actually here's what they did as well, they would go around in gangs, and I've seen this in Newfoundland still, the mummers go around calling the houses. They would target houses where they said it was going to be women, right? That's what they said, where there was going to be women where they could basically had a chance to court, because the church and all the dance halls closed down and there was no chance to meet up. So that's what they would do. And one of the things what they said was to dress up in brightly coloured clothes. The brighter the clothes you had, the better, right? Now here's a photograph from 2007 from the Losa down in the Basque country. This is Aileen, my other half here. But down in the Basque as well, they mark carnival. They mark, and in other countries do it, in northern Normandy they do it around Granville and places like that as well. But they down in the Basques are nuts. They go nuts for colour, bright colours, and this is called Fat Tuesday. Old women dress up as young women, and they put on hats with them with fine-looking young fellas on them, and they dance and they skip, and they hang out sheets. If you can see some of the Basque country photographs here, they hang out brightly coloured sheets. Now I don't know, but there's this, when John was talking about the South Leinster thing of the brightness, and right through the month of February, I could automatically see a connection, right? Maybe I'm making more of it, right? So that's the Basque stuff. Here are the Biddy boys down in Kerry. And I was talking to someone from Kerry this evening, and someone did house calling, but I know, Caoimhe, from your experience, you sent me this photograph. Do you want to tell the group what's going on here?
I did, yeah. So the biddies in Clorglan, it was kind of dying out more recently. And a couple of years ago, they decided to rekindle it and start a festival and have a parade. I think because house calling has become kind of difficult to do, it's not, something that people do anymore. So they created a little festival around Brigid's Day, and they have a parade through the town, and you can see all the straw hats here. They've introduced pampas grass over the years that grows in also everyone's gardens around Ireland now, but not particularly native. And you'll see a lot of them include fake flowers and tinsel and things like that. You're all using different things you can find and repurpose. And I was down working with them in 2019, and we made a red-eared cow, which is an animal associated with St. Bridget. It's a kind of fairy cow. Supposedly, she only drank the milk off this cow when she was young. So we made a lantern to accompany the parade, and they're really trying to revive it and kind of bring it to life a little bit. And they've introduced other elements. They want to kind of have a kind of light fire festival. So they were burning turf and doing all sorts of things out in the street as well. But it culminates with an event in the hall there, which would be very similar to the tradition that went on in the 70s. where they have a huge big event. All the Biddy groups perform. They might do a brush dance and sing some songs, and then they crown the King of the Biddies every year. So every year someone is nominated King of the Biddies, and I think Kilgubnett are the longest running Biddy group in Killorglin. They've been going for years and kept the tradition alive when others died. And it's actually, there's the Kilgubnett group, and then the National School, Kilgubnett National School, run an event, and they do it to raise funds for the schools. So the kind of idea of going out looking for money, and they're doing it on behalf of the school, which is lovely. And lovely that young people are getting involved in the tradition. It's very exciting. It's a real experience to go down and see this, I have to say.
One thing when you mentioned there, Caoimhe, is interesting, because I just caught my eye when you sent me this photograph earlier. The man carrying a lit turf. Yeah, you'll see that. I've seen it in Galway. You'll find it in Newfoundland. I recorded men in Newfoundland on Halloween, again, marching down the streets. They didn't have turf, but they used tar mops, and they would light him with petrol, whatever they could, and they'd light him and walk up and down the street, up and down the street. There's one thing that's really interesting about these Kerry things. If you look here, there's a uniform element to it. And it's very similar to like the Wexford Mummers, the Wexford Christmas, or the Wexford Mummers about the Wexford Play Mummers. Very set militaristic uniform. See this? You notice that? Also a little Brigid's cross. If you can see my mouse moving there, a little small Brigid's cross hung on that. There's a great RTE documentary. I don't have time to let you look at it now. It's called Biddy Boys Kerry on RTE. Have a look at it, right? Google it, right? And one of the men was filmed back in probably the 60s, I think, or maybe the 50s, 60s, and they talk about the advent of the introduction of the British Cross, and they put it down to the RTE logo as well. This man does. So we're working towards the
straw hats in that are just fabulous. There's some really, really elaborate ones in that little piece. Nancy was asking what did the hat signify, but I'm not sure, like they've kind of been adopted by, like, it's a common thing you see with straw boys and mummers and various different guising traditions in Ireland. I don't know if they signify a specific thing, only that it's been kind of custom for a long time for people to use straw to make costumes.
Yeah, people are very particular about it. Here in Wexford and in Open Sligo, people like Joe McGowan would be having conversations about this. And even William Green has photographs. William Green, a man I showed you from up in Ulster, he's photographs of straw boys. Straw boy costumes traditionally, as from were always associated with weddings. And then like a mixed bag of like a mixed bag or a dress-up bag, people would grab in bits and pieces. I know some people absolutely go mad when they see straw boy hats at hunting around. It's just, you know, it evolves and takes different shapes in different parts of the country. But there are similarities. You start spotting similarities and stuff. But again, the idea of wearing straw hats, across European, there's absolutely identical Polish straw boy traditions of going around Lent this time of year in the same kind of costumes as well. So, but listen, thanks for that question. Come here, I'm getting close to the end, so I want to show you, I want to talk about imagery as well, actually. It's interesting as imagery of Brigid, when we talk about all the beliefs and stuff. These are Marjorie Robinson's, are from 1910. These are images of Brigid, kind of, I suppose, again, 1910 images of Brigid. We don't have that many, really, you know, of these kind of images. There's a lot of images in the last 10, 15 years, kind of new age, neo-pagan kind of images cropping up, all right. Here's another thing. I was just trolling through stuff just to show you some stuff there this morning. Here's Brigid's cross, right? This is up in Cabinteely in Dublin. It's the only cross that I know with Brigid's name on it. Now the debate is out whether is this really Brigid, or is it really a male dressed in a long garment? But it's known as Brigid's cross. That's in Cabinteely. It's the only visual kind of sculptural image that I know, old image that I know of Brigid, right? You'll find it. It's still there. You can still see it on site, right? I was also interested as well, even when Caoimhe, you mentioned those cows there as well. I didn't know that, but the white cow with the red horns, and the idea of putting Brigid up in cow houses. Here's again another story that we're told as well. This is from Glastonbury over in England. The cult of Brigid was throughout Europe. It's really interesting. You find it throughout France, you find it through Germany in particular. You find it in Wales, you'll find it in the West Country of England. I'm not sure, probably Scotland as well. So it's interesting, the spread of her. But this is the sculpture, I think it's over the Tor in Glastonbury, and it's a carving of, to say that is supposed to be Brigid milking a cow, right? That's another visual image we're told of Brigid, right? again, there's visuals of her from Germany coming up. Stained glass windows here from Germany coming up. Interesting as well, the cow and brewers. It's interesting as well that she's the cow was there, but the cow was so prized in Irish life, for still prized in Irish life. So all the lovely green grass we have and the milk we produce, and the protection of butter and the milk yield, which is also associated with brewers. So that's an interesting one for all the Irish men out there, whatever, and women who like drink. But it's interesting as how she became such a figure, you know, connecting with brewery.
I think one of the famous stories about her is that she had guests visiting her monastery, and she'd nothing to serve them, and she served them her bath water, which magically had converted itself into beer. So it's one of the reasons she's a patron saint of brewers.
And that's why we like her so much. But it's interesting. I'm coming towards the end. I hope you're getting some kind of sense here. Even the names. There's Brigids, there's Breeds, there's Brides, there's Bridgets with J's. There's different names. This is from a lovely holy well, actually, that was cleaned up near us in Wexford. There's quite a few holy wells in Wexford with Bridgets, because I'm just talking about my home county here, as in other parts of the country as well. I would recommend you getting your hands on, I have his book here somewhere. I had it here in my hands earlier today. It's called The Life of Brigid of Kildare. A really good book, with more academic book on the life of Brigid. But it's interesting, there was like 115 holy wells dedicated to Brigid around the country, right? And I even went onto lookannam.ie or Place Names Commission and just typed in some of these things like Tubber Breed, Tubber Bride, different spellings, and you will see even place names cropping up where Brigid's names are there. Just an interesting thing to show you. Here's even place names with Kilbride. You can just type in Kilbride just to watch the place names with Kilbride coming up. Again, all associated with her.
There's more smaller. I know my dad would be well aware of Kilbride Point, which is a favourite fishing spot on Loch Mask in Galway. So there's loads of smaller names with that. That attached, smaller places with it.
Yeah. Now, one of the things which I love, we have the ancient connections, we have the cult connections, in the sense of the religious sections over from the 600s right over through Wales and Cornwall and England and all down through Brittany and all over into mainland Europe. But it's interesting even in the New World as well. Now I know it's not associated with Brigid, but it's probably associated with a place name where someone came from. Even in St. John's, back to the Newfoundland connection again, a massive Newfoundland connection with Ireland. There's a suburb or an area called Kilbride, or recorded a woman from Kilbride. You go down to Sydney or down to Melbourne, just Kilbride. There's loads of Kilbrides in Australia, by the way. So it's even just interesting just to watch that pan out as well. And even our place names, like even here's again Wexford, because I'm talking about my home county here, is down the road here with the Blackwater, again St. Bridget's Cross. All these place names associated with Brigid. But I won't go into detail about that, but one thing I do want to talk to you about, and I can roughly end it there with that, is the date in which we're marking this, and we should never lose sight of that. Annie is like myself, we've been through this long winter. I found this January, even though we're busy, I found it hard and I found it long. And we all know why we're finding it hard and long normally, but we're finding it extra hard and extra long this year, right? And we do take great delight in knowing that we've turned that corner. We do take great delight when we know that spring, our start of our spring is here. And it was also important, I picked up this saying in Newfoundland, and it's funny, I came back and I had to go to Newfoundland to find it back here. And I'd only found a scattering of it in Kilkenny and parts of Waterford, right? Give or take this verse, right? And they would say around Candlemas Day, which is the 2nd of February, half your prog and half your hay, eat your supper by the light of day. Right, and it was a little one of those little things with lifetime little verses, but basically that you knew that the light was coming, the light was changing, you could eat your supper. And it was also really important for anyone who's rural, especially rural ones, forget about the townies for a while there, lads, the ones you'd need half your provisions, that's the prog word of it, and half your hay. So you'd need enough to be able to feed your stock and enough for yourself. That's why there were spring trashings as well, folks, right? So that winter was a really crucial point going into the spring where we can start to plant and get things ready for the summer. And that was a kind of a thing where it would remind you, listen, I have to have half me prog and half me hay, and I'll eat my supper by the light of day. And that's interesting as well. This is another box belonged to my grandmother. I got when she passed away. She was 103 when she passed away, but when I went through her boxes, I found things like her candles and her St. Bridget's Cross I must have made for years ago, right? and light was important. And when you go to St. Blaise's Day and Candlemas Day, literally a couple of days afterwards, folks, right? They're all tied in. I took this photograph actually at the neighbour's house, neighbour's cow house. A man called Willie Sinnott, he passed away maybe 15, 20 years ago. Was in his hay barn during the summer, and he didn't have his candle left over by his electric socket as you went in the same place you'd find the Brigid's cross in the cow house. And this was not left here. People would go, that's there now for the electricity going. It wasn't. It was there for a cow that was calving. The candle was lit, and the candle sometimes was marked or ran under the belly of the calving cow or around it, right? And it took me to go to Newfoundland. I was in someone's house one day, and I saw this, and I was in a man called Kenneth's Nash house, and I was looking the way they kept Blessed Palm up or the fuse box, the exact same way as we did it here in Ireland, this part of Ireland. And I noticed these drops of wax on their stuff. And I said, what's going on there? And what they did in Candlemas Day, and again, it took me to go to Newfoundland to figure it out because it was done here as well, was this candle and this light at this time of the year, where there were candle was lit, and there were 4 drops of wax lit in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And they were dropped on dishwasher or on tumble dryers, they were dropped on the ends of the beds, they were dropped on your chainsaw, your axe, the left shoulder, your coat, your work boots, your work hat. You would see men, full-grown adult men, going around with 4 drops of wax on their shoulders, right? And again, that's all tied back into light and the coming of spring and the coming of things growing and that brightness that we're here. And here, lads, I spotted my first snowdrops the other day. These are stock photographs, by the way. Not even I should have took them. I spotted my first daffodil today, and I spotted my first primroses last week. And here's the top of it all. I'll end with this, right? This was taken about 2 years ago, and it was taken. This is my little daughter Nellie, and this is our pet lamb, and she was born on St. Brigid's Day. And that's the other thing. Spring is in the air, life is in the air, and life, we're turning that dark winter. And they're coming in here behind me right now because we're going to end with a song. We're going to end my talk with a song with you. And this is Brigid the lamb, right? And here she is. This is Brigid the lamb when she was a baby. And there she was when she was dressed up, running around the jumper, running around the yard. And again, why is this date important to us? It's important to me because I know we've turned that corner and we're going into the spring. And by Jesus, we need it this year more than ever in our lives. So on that note, I'm going to end and stop talking to you. And I'm going to let Nellie, Eppie, and Nan here, they've got a song. There's very few songs actually written about Brigid, by the way. And again, I'll put up a link or Folklore.ie to find stuff. A friend of ours called Catherine Ann Cullen wrote this song. Aileen might explain to you. Another friend called Deirdre Scanlon wrote another song. There's very few songs about Brigid. So here is a song about Brigid and Brigid's story. Let Aileen explain, and I'll end I'll get out of the way. Go there. You want it? No, you don't have to talk about it. She's asking me, does she need to talk about it? Here, I'll get out of the way. You want in? Okay. So, Alien's coming in here, lads. So, you all okay? Can you all sit down and you all happy enough? Now,
let me get the stool so the girls can come
I'll
in.
move my camera.
Yeah. Okay, now you have it back. Okay, so this is a song which Catherine Ann Cullen wrote for a project called Songs for Our Children, which myself and Mick coordinated. It was written just a year ago about, and it tells the tale of one great story that's connected with Brigid, which is that of her cloak. So the story is in the song, nicely told in the song. Wait till I move these girls up a little bit. And Nellie, do you know what you'll do? You come in here, Pet. Now, you ready? No, stand up, be all right? Yeah. Yeah. There was a wise woman, we're all agreed. Some called her Brigid, some called her Brigid. She grew up kind and she liked a joke, and she always wore a wee small cloak. About 1500 years ago, this strong young woman to Kildare did go to build a church mid the common folk, with her 4 best friends and her wee small cloak. Now the king of Leinster had fields galore, so Brigid went knocking at his castle door. Would you give us a field by the old oak tree to build a church for my friends and me? Well, the mean old king, he gave a roar, saying, what kind of fool do you take me for? Sure, nobody gets as rich as me by giving their fields to the poor for free. So Brigid smiled, would you grant instead the land as far as my cloak will spread? The king laughed loudly at this joke, 'cause you wouldn't cover much with her wee small cloak. To see how far the cloak would reach, her four best friends took a corner each. When she shouted go, they all set forth, walking east and west and south and north. The king was so mad he began to choke, and out of his ears came puffs of smoke. His mean little heart it nearly broke when he saw the measure of Brigid's cloak. But his heart was changed by Brigid's tower, and his men built her chapel with a tall bell tower. Now they called it Kildara, the church of the oak, on the land that was covered by Brigid's cloak. Thank you, folks.
Girls, thank you so much. That was gorgeous.
That was Effie and Nellie and Nan, and there was a song by Catherine Ann Cullen. There is a little tutorial we have made, myself and Nellie, if you wanted to look it up. It's on Mix YouTube channel. So if you went in there, you'd find it. There's about a 15-minute tutorial if you wanted to share it, especially with family, with children, you know.
I'm going to do a group email at the end just to send everyone links to Mick's work if you're not already familiar with it. So I'll send you all a few links later on, and hopefully leave you with a few things to watch and entertain yourselves tomorrow, and look forward to the brighter days ahead of us, hopefully.
Happy spring, everyone.